Thanks as always for the download, the stream, however you're listening to Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast. And I want to tell you about the best way to listen to Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast, and that's through Stitcher Premium. If you go right now to Stitcher.com/notsam and sign up for Stitcher Premium, not only are you going to be able to get first dibs on Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast each and every week it comes out, you'll get it exclusively ad-free over at Stitcher Premium, no ads on the whole podcast, and twice a month, every other Monday or so, we're going to be putting out a brand new show called Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast, Captive Audience, where I will sit down with somebody I'm close with that doesn't necessarily watch a ton of wrestling and show them some of the worst shows that the WWE Network has to offer. I'm talking about Nitros from the early 2000s. I'm talking about pay-per-views. I'm talking about the old school stuff. Whatever you can think of, and of course it becomes an interactive experience when you guys not only get to watch along, but get to suggest what bad wrestling we're watching, and I have to try to explain to a non-wrestling fan. The goal is always going to be to get them on board, whether it's my wife, my dad, my buddy, whoever it is. I'm going to want to get them on board with realizing that wrestling is cool, but it's going to be a challenge because I'm going to have to do it while showing them some of the worst that wrestling has to offer. The only way you're going to be able to listen to that show is if you sign up for this podcast at Stitcher Premium, Stitcher.com/notsam. Wait till you hear this. It's $5 a month or $35 a year, which is the deal of the century. For $35 a year, you'll get Stitcher Premium. You'll get this show ad-free. You'll get the exclusive Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast Captive Audience show. And get this. $35 a year, that's it. You're going to get access to every show. Not just the Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast Premium, but every show that Stitcher Premium has to offer. Go to Stitcher.com/notsam. It's the best way to listen to Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast. It's the best way to support Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast. And the best thing that you can do right now, well, hit pause, go to Stitcher, sign up for Stitcher Premium, sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode of Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast. Introducing your host from New York, here is Sam Roberts.
Welcome. I got my Howard Finkel action figure this week. Buddy that I met on Twitter sent it over. Mattel put him out in a Build-A-Figure set. If you buy Ravishing Rick Rude, Cowboy Bob Orton, Million Dollar Man Ted DiBiase in the green tux, and an Iraqi sympathizer Sergeant Slaughter, which to me is one of the great figures Mattel has done. Sergeant Slaughter with a turban and everything. If you buy all four figures, you get a piece of the Fink with each figure, and when you buy the set, you get to build him. And I do have a Howard Finkel action figure. It's amazing within weeks adding Mean Gene Okerlund and Howard Finkel to my WWE action figure collection. You have to love what Mattel is doing. Welcome to Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast. Speaking of love, thank you for all the love on last week's episode. I know it resonated with Renee Young. It resonated with me. We were very, very happy with how many of you really enjoyed last week's show. And that video is going to be up on youtube.com/notsam. Of course, the Titus O'Neil video from 2 weeks ago is up now on YouTube, but it's a fun video to watch because it's just a conversation amongst two people. So I appreciate all you guys loving it. I love the Renee Young interview, to tell you the truth. I thought it provided a lot of insight into a person that I think a lot of us as fans are interested in, especially as she's developed within the WWE over the last 5 years. So that was very, very exciting. This week, this is what I'm going to talk about in the bridge segment. So if you skip over that segment between the interview and State of Wrestling, you're missing out. I got to see an exclusive, it was only a few of us. I'll tell you who was there. HBO, actually I'll tell you who was there during the bridge segment, but HBO provided a few of us with an advanced screening of the Bill Simmons Andre the Giant documentary that teasers have been out. It comes out in the beginning of April on HBO. And I won't tell you what I thought of it. Yeah, I tweeted about it, so, there's some hint about it, and I Instagrammed. But I'll get more into detail during the bridge segment after this week's interview. But it's definitely worth talking about. Very, very interesting. And it's an interesting time for wrestling documentaries in general, especially the precedent that was set by the Ric Flair 30 for 30, the XFL 30 for 30. It's just wrestling stories are starting to enter into the mainstream in an even bigger way than when that movie The Wrestler came out. It's very, very interesting because the true stories of these guys are starting to hit not wrestling fans, but mainstream sports fans and just people. So, and it's only a good thing. It's a really, really good thing for the wrestling business in general. But we're going to talk about the Andre the Giant documentary in the bridge segment. We're going to talk about the wrestling business in general in State of Wrestling because I have a rant to go on. But my guest this week, you could probably tell by looking at the title of this week's episode, is none other than Booker T. Last week during the State of Wrestling, I talked about who I might want to get on, and it's kind of a lot of pressure these days. I really liked the last 3 podcasts we put. I mean, I love doing this podcast, but the interviews that we put out, I loved the JBL, Bruce Pritchard, Eric Bischoff podcast. I think the Titus O'Neil interview was this great interview that a lot of people didn't expect because people don't know Titus O'Neil like that, but that turned out to be this amazing thing. I thought the Renee Young interview was great. So I said, how do I follow all this up? Last week we were talking about the battle that was raging on the internet between Corey Graves and Booker T. So I wanted to get Corey Graves on the podcast because he's a buddy. And unfortunately, Corey, here's what people don't realize about Corey Graves. Okay, he's the only guy who is now the voice of everything. He's the voice of Raw. He's the voice of SmackDown. He does mixed match. He's doing video game stuff right now for the next WWE video game. He's on all the pay-per-views. The pay-per-views that are dual branded, he ends up doing every single match because he's on all the shows. It's amazing the amount. Well, when we were there in where was it? In Philly for NXT TakeOver, he was there kicking in for the NXT TakeOver kickoff show. The amount of work, the volume that Corey Graves has to handle is kind of insane. So I always feel bad reaching out to him being like, hey, bro, you want to come over and do this podcast? But I did because I promised I would. And he did say he didn't have time last week. He also, by the way, on top of all those WWE responsibilities that I just listed, he's got a family and children. Okay, this is a father who loves his family. So I've got to tear him away from his family to get him on the podcast. And I will. I promise you I will. Last week was just too short notice. He couldn't do it. So I said, okay, Graves. Oh, what's wrong? Ridiculous work responsibilities? Oh, a family? Oh, well, guess what? I'm getting Booker T then. I'm getting your mortal enemy. The guy that you have more heat with in the locker room than Macho Man did with Hogan. Booker T is going to be my guest on the podcast, and I reached out to him, and I reached out to his co-host, Brad Gilmore from Heated Conversations, the podcast that Booker T does, which is also a radio show if you're there in Houston. And I said, Brad, we got to make this happen. And Book was down, and we did it. Just 24 hours removed from the publishing of this podcast is when this interview went down. So, of course, Booker, he rocked the world with his Corey Graves feud that ended up being, people call it a hoax, and maybe we should talk about this more in the bridge segment. Maybe I should let you listen to the interview, and then we'll discuss once the interview is done. I think that's exactly what we should do. Let's get right into it. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest, and by the way, we talk about the Corey Graves stuff, and then we start getting into being in WCW and surviving while the NWO was so hot, and then coming over to WWE and making that transition, and some of the ridiculous things that he's had to do in WWE, and whether or not he wanted to, and if he said no to stuff, and so much to talk about with this Hall of Famer, Booker T. So why would I keep it from you any longer, ladies and gentlemen, this week on Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast, my exclusive interview with Booker T.
And now, the Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast interview.
Well, I guess now is as appropriate time as ever to welcome to Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast, ladies and gentlemen, the five-time WCW champion of the world, the legend, the Hall of Famer, Booker T. Welcome, Booker.
Hey, man, what's going on, Sam?
How are you?
Man, I'm doing grand, man. I feel good. I feel like, like float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. That's the way I feel right now.
Right. Nobody's throwing you off your jobs to go work local radio in the afternoons or anything like that?
I'm still a little hot about that comment. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you were like, wait a minute. We were joking until that one.
Yeah, exactly. Now you looking for a whooping.
So, like, I'll tell you my experience with the whole Booker T. Corey Graves controversy, and I love that on Heated Conversations this week, it finally came to a head, and this thing that was, like, perfect. Like, up until, like, you saying, I want Corey Graves to call into my show, and then Corey tweeting out, hey, you got my number. and then it just pops up, and it's kind of what I assumed it was, but I my view on it was too close. That's why I didn't get involved. I didn't want to spoil it for anybody. I didn't want to say anything. But like, so I saw you last on Royal Rumble Sunday in the building, you know, and because you were going back and forth doing commentary for some of the show, and you were sitting there, and Otunga was there, and backstage, jokingly, you were yelling at Otunga about how you were only supposed to be filling in for him for 6 weeks, and it's been 8 months, and when are you going to be able to get off commentary and whatever. Everybody's joking around, but point being, you got a family, you want to go home. And the next day, I see the news, Jonathan Coachman's on Raw, and I go, oh, that seems like it's great news for Booker because and that you're going to be doing the pre-shows again. So I go, you know, no offense to Otunga at all, but good news for me because I love doing those pre-shows with Booker. And you don't have to leave your family every single week to go travel for Raw. But unbeknownst to me, about a week later, it was Corey Graves the whole time who had taken you off of Raw commentary. I guess there was this tension in the air that I somehow missed. Of all the times I've been in the same room of you and Graves, I missed all this tension that was there. But I'm not there every day, so maybe I missed it. Yeah. And you were ready to, not at an airport, not in an arena, but on the street or to Starbucks, whoop that ass. And like, look, I hear you doing this, and in my mind, I go, okay, I think this is just Booker and Brad Gilmore does the show with Booker. I think this is just those guys goofing around. And if I know Graves, he's going to realize exactly what this is, and he's going to goof around right back with them. And that's kind of what happened. But I guess my question is, did you have any idea that people wanted to see in 2018 you could get people this interested in a potential Corey Graves versus Booker T match?
Wow. You know, that's the thing right there. You know, not in a million years. You know what the thing was? When me and Brad did it, before I said it, I said, now I know all of the dirt sheets are probably going to pick this up, like Meltzer, you know, and all the rest of them. I know those guys are going to pick this up. So let me just, you know, get it out there. You know, yeah, Corey Graves is the reason I'm not on Monday Night Raw anymore. Yeah, he's the reason, of course. Yeah. And the thing was, you know, Brad and I, we just had a last segment, you know, of 14 minutes that we had nothing to talk about.
Not a thing.
Not one thing. So we tried to fill in time, you know, just so, you know, our sponsors, you know, the station won't get mad at us, you know.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing about talk radio is you can't, there's no like, okay, I guess we're done. Like you have a time slot that you have to fill.
Bottom line.
Right.
So we filled a time slot, and Corey Graves was just the brunt of it. But the thing was, on Twitter, on social media, people been asking for the longest, do Booker T and Corey Graves really got heat? Just because a few looks that I've given him, you know, on Monday Night Raw. Like, I really want to beat him up. But what this proves, though, Sam, what this proves is wrestling is still alive. The angles are still alive. The storylines could still be valid, you know, if one played them properly, you know what I mean? Because people really thought I was upset with Corey Graves to the point that, you know, Forbes, USA Today, you know, SB Nation, Sports Illustrated, yes. Everybody picked it up. These journalists that went to college, you know, for this, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what's really crazy. But wrestling is still truly alive, as well as, and let me know that Booker T is still valid. Somebody still think that Booker T will whoop that ass in a heartbeat. That's what I can take from this whole thing.
I did. I said on my podcast, I said, look, in my personal opinion, without getting too much into it, I would imagine these are two guys just goofing on each other. But if it's not, as much as I love Graves and as much as I think that he could win a lot of fights, he's a guy who's scrapped in his life, I do think Booker would whoop that ass. Booker's lived that life. So I loved, first of all, the way you framed it. The way you just described it just now was you saying, look, I know this is going to end up on the dirt sheets. So you almost pushed the dirt sheets into talking about it because they now all of a sudden they think like, oh, no, yeah, Booker, I was going to talk about this. And now that he's said it, I definitely should publish it. But do you think because of this, I guess because us fans are closer to the business than we've ever been before, it's funny to me because people are treating this like it's either work or a shoot, like it's those words, right? Well, if it's a work, then what's the payoff and who's doing this and what? And there's never a moment where people are stopping and being like, wait, these are two guys that just kind of goof around and know each other and are friends with each other. Like, couldn't it just be not a work, not a shoot, but a guy goofing on his friend and his friend goofing back, and it just happens to be a couple of friends that a lot of eyes are on?
You know, you said it. You just said it right there. Two guys joking around. Brad and I, we laughed the whole 14 segments. I mean, it was so entertaining. Brad was almost crying and literally had to walk away from the mic several times. You know what I mean? Because like you said, you know, I'm going to catch him. You know, I ain't going to do nothing to him at the job.
Not in the job.
I'm not going to do nothing to him at the airport.
You wouldn't do it in the airport.
But if I catch him on the street.
In a Starbucks.
You know, if I catch him in Starbucks.
Or get that receipt.
I'm going to go have a tattoo. You know, I'm going to rearrange this booth for the hairdo. You know, I get mean when you mess with my green. Now see if I'm joking. You know, I mean, come on now. If that's not a wrestling promo.
Right.
This was the funniest thing, Sam. Charmel was reading it back to me. One of the articles, I think it was the Forbes article. If you go back and read the Forbes article, the writer, he had to be black. No, seriously. I think he was a black writer.
Okay.
And he formed the story to the point to where it went from me beating up Corey Graves to race in professional wrestling. And I'm like, wait a minute, how did that happen? You know what I mean? I mean, it's a black guy wanting to fight a white guy. That has nothing to do with race, or, you know, relations or anything. And it was just funny to me to see how they took it, and there.
That's
again,
when you know. By the way, that's when you know that you've gone too far. When the reports start going like, and not only is this a clear problem to anybody watching, but it's a systemic problem within the industry, and you're like, wait.
The systemic problem was he was talking about black commentators. He was like, well, you know, they don't have Booker T back on commentary now. So they put Coach out there. They got Baron Saxon over here, and then down in NXT, you know, they got Percy Watson, you know, and so that you can see they're really trying with their diversity. Now, my question is this: why is that a topic of conversation, as well as if it wasn't a black commentator up there, that would be the topic of conversation. So people are always trying to make something out of nothing, just like this story between Corey Graves and I. So much news out there in the world, Sam, that should be covered. That's real news. That, you know, and myself and Brad, we don't try to give a whole lot of validity to Trump's fake news, but when you see stuff like that, when you hear stuff like that, and you're a part of it, what can you say? You can't turn a blind eye. You got to talk about it, and you got to call these fake reporters out, like the Meltzers, who said he confirmed that Booker T and Corey Graves really hurt each other from his sources.
They really have heat.
Who is his sources? You know what I mean? That's what I want to know. Because
I would love to know.
No one called him for a statement. No one called me for a statement. But I tell you, if they can get those clicks, if they can get those people those views, man, they're happy these days. And that's where our media is today, Sam. And that's a sad, sad state. Yeah.
Does it blow your mind when it's one thing if it's like Dave Meltzer, who's been, a quote unquote wrestling journalist, but really
whoa. Dirt sheet.
Right. Okay. So it's one thing if it's a dirt sheet. It's one thing if it's one of these wrestling like rumor websites. That anybody who knows that if you look at quote unquote news from those sources, 80 to 90% of it is wrong, or it's leaked purposely so that a story gets told. But did you ever think, as many years as you've been involved in wrestling, that you would get to a point where the dirt sheets become a part of Forbes and Sports Illustrated and all these reputable websites. Did you ever think that dirt sheet writing would come to legitimate news sources?
Let me tell you, Sam. After the first night, after Saturday night, Brad called me Sunday morning.
Super Bowl Sunday.
Yeah, Brad called me early Sunday morning, and I'm like, why is Brad calling me on Sunday morning? And he goes, Book, have you seen this? And I'll go, what are you talking about? He's like, man, this thing is everywhere. He said, maybe you should make a statement. And I go, what? I'm not making a statement. What are you talking about? So we blew it off, and the following Monday morning, my phone rang again, and who it is? It's Brad. Brad saying, no, Book, we really need to make a statement.
Because Brad's from the radio world, where he's starting to get worried. Like, we're losing control of the narrative here, Book. We gotta do something here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was like, man, Book. I mean, it's one thing, like you said, Sam, if it's Meltzer or whomever, but it's another when I see, like, I type in Booker T in Google, and Forbes.com is running an article like how Booker's going to run up on Sam Roberts because he gets mean when he messes with his green. And I was like, Book, I don't know. I know it's a big joke, but maybe we should say something, or maybe you should call Corey. And then and it was actually on Monday was your anniversary, right?
Yeah.
And you called Corey Graves, and then and he put out the Art of War tweet, and then the afternoon radio thing. I mean, it was all it was phenomenally done. But like my thing was, it was never intended, like you said earlier, it was never intended to be a work. It wasn't a shoot, but people took it and they essentially worked themselves.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm still wondering, because like I said, if you listen to, I did a rap song. I did a rap
song. We played a Migos record.
Yeah,
and Booker talks smack over a Migos.
Walking like you're talking. Walking like you're talking. Right hand. Walking like you're talking. Left hand. Walking like you're talking. Uppercut. Walking like you're talking. Tap out. Walking like you're talking. Choke out. Walking like you're talking. WrestleMania. Walking like you're talking. WrestleMania. I'm like, wait a minute. How could that be serious? I'm like, come on here.
And we followed it up, by the way, by playing the Hulk Hogan diss by Macho Man Randy Savage.
I heard that. I heard Be a Man, Hulk, right?
It was good.
Yeah.
It was great. It was great. It was great radio. It really was.
Right.
And it really was. That's why I really don't understand it. I really don't.
That's the name of the game. I mean, there have been, in my life in radio, there have been like 2 or 3 famous people that have kind of taken shots at me and said, unkind things. And when somebody like that takes a shot at me in a public way, it's hours of, I don't care who says what about me, but it becomes hours and hours of radio because, like you said, it's good radio. Was there any part of you, Book, you're like an old school wrestling guy, was there any part of you that is like, look, this isn't an angle, this isn't like we're not working, it's just a thing like that we're doing, but now it's become an angle, and now everybody's worked themselves into this thing. Was there any part of you that did not want to ever pull the curtain back?
Yeah, I swear, for a minute, I started to just run with it. But my thing is, I did not want to do that because I wouldn't have been able to make my point.
Right.
And these days, it's not about me. I could honestly say that if it was about me, if I was one of these old guys, that really wanted the limelight and wanted to, bask in the glory of, people talking about me, I wouldn't have said that this was not a work or anything like that. I would have ran it to the hilt. You know what I mean? But my thing is this: I'm a totally different person. I'm in a totally different place in my life right now, and I really don't have time for stuff like this. As far as people, on social media, talking about, trying to pit me and Corey Graves against each other. I mean, Corey Graves is a fine young man that's doing a great job in WWE, and he got a lot of people, don't like him. A lot of people, despise. I would even go to the point to say hate Corey Graves. And my thing is, if Corey Graves got people feeling that way, he's doing his job. He's doing a great job. He's doing something a lot of guys on the roster need to learn how to do. And that's become a really, really good heel. At one point in time, Vicky Guerrero was like the top heel in the company. And I need these young guys to know exactly, how to be able to tap into exactly what these, veterans, are doing out there. How did I make people, get into a frenzy like this by, speaking in a certain tone, giving a certain look? That's what this thing is truly all about. It's not about me at this time, but making a statement as far as these so-called journalists and these so-called publications, writing stories to the point, to where it's all fabricated, it's all, embellished to the point that it's not real. None non-factual. Somebody need to call that out, and someone like me saying it, I think people will look at it and say maybe we do need to look in, these publications and whatnot.
Yeah, that's on a mainstream level. Like, let's take a real look at what's going on here, but also on a performer level, like, I think that it's a lesson. And there have been a couple guys who have done this well in terms of utilizing things like social media, or as many guys as have podcasts and stuff now, using podcasts and things like that to let wrestling escape the TV show, because that's when people really get worked up, right? Because when a guy goes on and goes like, well, Raw is just a TV show, I'm a different guy, and these guys are, and really just exposes everything, it becomes difficult to lose yourself in what's going on Monday night. But when you have things where you're questioning, like, oh, no, I think this is real, because he wouldn't be posting on Twitter about this. Well, Booker wouldn't be going on his radio show and saying this. Well, I did notice some tension there, and I bet that was real. That's when people really start to care, right?
I really honestly, truly believe you just said something. I always used to look at my performance like, it had to be something totally different than everyone else on the card that night. It was almost as if, I would put myself in a fan's, seat, and I would say, okay, now I'm sitting with my buddy, and I say, hey, John, check this match out right here. Watch these two guys, man. Watch how they work. And then the next match come out, and I go, hey, John, hey, man, check these guys out. Look at their performance. And then Booker T comes out, and I say, hey, John, hold up. Now you check this guy here out.
Right.
This dude's bad. Now you look at this guy different than everybody else on the show, and we're all doing the exact same thing. That's what I need these young guys to be able to tap into: the looks, the certain gestures you have, when you're out there performing, making it as real as you possibly can. Staying in the moment. Staying in the moment is very, very important for these guys in their careers, and social media, they can use it to their advantage, opposed to just looking at how many followers they have from how many this is awesome chants we got from the match we had last night. That what I need these young guys to understand more than anything. Let's tap into the realism of the professional wrestling, the art of the game, the Shakespeare, the Romeo and Juliet, the Phantom of the Opera of what we really honestly truly do.
Yeah, and you said something really, really interesting about Corey Graves not being afraid of getting hated by people, because that's what he's supposed to be doing. And Bruce Pritchard was on the podcast like a couple weeks ago, and he was bringing, I think it was Bruce who was bringing up that one of the big problems that he's had to deal with and that he sees continuing is that people get afraid of heat. That the heat comes, and where 20 years ago if the building rioted, it was a good night. Now a lot of performers, they like to hear the adulation, but they get nervous, and they get scared of the heat when it becomes real, and they kind of don't want to do it anymore.
If these young guys only knew what Sergeant Slaughter had to go through when he turned on America.
Oof.
I mean, it was the biggest thing in professional wrestling as far as heat goes, as far as a man needing, security wherever he would walk. Because it was about going out there and making those fans feel a certain way about this American that turned his back on us. Sergeant Slaughter, you got to be kidding me. So that's what for me, the heel role was endeared. I wanted to go out there and make the fans really honestly truly despise me, and I say this, I tell a little bit of a little story here. Yeah. I was in my first match in Canada. A good friend of mine, we're really close friends, former partner of mine, in the main event Mafia, Big Kevin Nash. I had a match with Kevin Nash, and it was my first match in Canada, in Toronto, Canada. He had been there many times before. People loved him, as Diesel, when he went there. Now he's coming back in the WCW, he's still Diesel to those fans over there in Canada. And he went out, they were NWO. He went out, he gave everybody the NWO kiss, the little kiss sign that they would do. NWO in the house. Everybody in the crowd erupted. And they had me, I'm back in the back listening to this. I'm like, he's the bad guy, supposedly. And I came, they played my music, and I walked out of the curtain, and they booed the crap out of me. That's when I knew the NWO, the bad guys, was killing the business, because they didn't want the heat. They wanted the adulation. That almost ruined the NWO. single-handedly almost ruined the business as far as bad guys, good guys, cowboys, and Indians. You don't want to mess that up.
Yeah, and I've had a theory about the NWO, and I'd love your perspective on it because you were there. I feel like as many things as there are that quote unquote killed WCW, and it was the corporate merger, and it was this guy being brought in, and that guy having creative control, whatever, blah blah blah. To me, I thought that as important as the NWO was in terms of taking wrestling to a different level and bringing realism in and bringing a different audience to it, I always felt that the long-term effect on it was terrible for WCW because all of us fans, and I know because I was watching, were conditioned to know that WCW is not cool. The NWO is cool. So once we get tired of the NWO, it didn't make WCW any cooler. We were conditioned to WCW not being cool. So I guess we should go over to WWF now. Right?
That's true too. As well as the thing was, I'm huge as far as staying in the background as far as reality of wrestling goes, my company,
right?
Because I have to be able to look at it from a disposition, almost from an outside perspective. And the thing was with WCW, the big thing was turning Hulk Hogan heel. Hulk Hogan being the bad guy. We shouldn't do this. People don't want to see Hulk Hogan as the bad guy. Hulk Hogan is the ultimate good guy, but we say, okay, we're going to turn him into the bad guy. We turn Hulk Hogan into the bad guy with NWO, but Hulk Hogan is still the good guy. That makes no sense to me. And I was right in the middle of it, and I'm watching it, and I'm like, wait a minute. He's still going out and doing the same thing. He still wants the people to love him. He's not a bad guy. What is going on here? And I had this conversation with Eric Bischoff, and and he was asking me about the NWO, and I was telling him how they almost single-handedly ruined the business. He was like, wow, I didn't know you felt that way. Well, I do. You know what I mean? Because I don't know how anyone, running a company could actually let something like that happen. The NWO was a great idea, and it could have been a really, really cool faction if the bad guys were truly the bad guys. But that's when fans start looking at, the good guy as the good guy is the bad guy, and the bad guy is the good guy. And it totally messed up the flavor of what wrestling truly is.
Right, and I mean that's when WWE was able to step in and redefine those roles and go like, okay, well if you're going to cheer a guy like Steve Austin, who's a traditional bad guy, we're going to show you a real bad guy, and here comes Mr. McMahon, right?
Yes, indeed. And the real bad guy was Mr. McMahon, and then the bad guy Stone Cold Steve Austin turned into the good guy who rebelled against the office and the authority, which made that totally work, in a vice versa perspective for them than it did for us. They knew how to work it properly, opposed to WCW just almost honestly slipped on a banana peel and had a great idea in the NWO.
So
I don't think they knew that was going to happen. It wasn't like it was in a war room and somebody goes, "Hey guys, I got an idea. We need to come up with a faction. Oh,
right.
wait, I got a. Hey, what about this? The NWO, the New World Order. We're going to make T-shirts. Everybody's going to love it. Everything's going to be black and white. That's what we will do. That's what we will do this thing." It didn't happen like that. Trust me.
Just like Booker and Corey didn't plan anything prior.
Exactly
Right.
my point.
Right.
It just
So you're saying
morphed into something that was so spectacular that it got to the point to where it got out of control. NWO, Red and Black, Wolfpack, the LWO, I don't know how many WOs, but
So I promise we'll get back to Booker T momentarily. He's going to hit you with a Kevin Nash story that it's unbelievable. However, before we get there, people ask me all the time, where is the centralized location for everything that happens on the Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast? And that's easy. Notsam.com. If you're not already going, make sure that you're checking it out. Number one, it gets updated with every Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast. You'll be able to see a photo there. You can listen to the podcast for free on the website, whatever you want to do. Number two, the latest episode of Sam Roberts Now, my exclusive YouTube show, is published on notsam.com on the very front page each and every single time you go. Number 3, if you go up to the corner, there's a little link that says Not Sam Store. Click that link and you will find the exclusive location of the Not Sam lapel pins available now. You can get the Not Sam logo. You can get the Sam Roberts caricature thing, the little cartoon character. You can pin it onto your lapel, onto your book bag, onto your jacket, whatever you want to do, but you can declare your intention to ride with this Not Sam train as far as it'll take you. Go over to notsam.com. If you're not already checking it out, make it a daily stop. Of course, you can also fill out the comment box, and that is the best way to communicate directly with yours truly, Sam Roberts. Now, back to Booker T.
Everybody want, I tell you, Kevin Nash came to me. He goes, Book, hey, Book, man, this NWO thing's getting real hot, bro. And man, we need some color, man. And, I swear to God, that's how he said it. He said, we need some color, bro. You know what I mean?
Vincent just isn't cutting it.
I was about to say, Virgil wasn't cutting it, huh?
Yeah, he goes, we want to bring you in, man, I go, man, thanks, but no thanks. No way. I said, I'm a solo act, man. I'm going to stick it out on my own, and I was the only one who had my own music. Everybody else was coming out to NWO music on the show. It was ridiculous. And I think that was my come up.
Yeah. So are you terrified at any point when you're working in WCW? Like, you're like, okay, not so much because, I want to be in the NWO, because clearly you had no interest in being in the NWO. But when you're like, wait a minute, this is destroying the business, and this is my business. Like, I haven't hit my peak yet, and I'm potentially watching everything get destroyed around me. Are you going, I got to get out of here, or because you stayed until the bitter end?
Guys was paying me a lot of money.
That's
man.
it.
I still got WCW money.
It's hard. So you're saying it's hard to panic when you're rich?
Exactly my point. You know what I'm saying? The thing was, if the bottom fell out, which I tell my students all the time, preparation is the only luck you're ever going to have. Mm-hmm. I was prepared for when the bottom fell out. I was one of the only guys prepared for when WCW folded and went under. I was looking to test myself and see how good I was with, the best in the world in the WWE outfit that time, WWE now. So my thing was I knew, everything doesn't last forever, and the way they were spending, Ted Turner and Viacom's money back at that time, I knew somebody was going to realize as soon as tax season came around.
Once the books get a once over.
Exactly. So I'm like, let me ride this as long as I could. Only thing I hate more than anything, WCW closing down. If they're just going to close down 6 months later, man, I had $1.2 million contract on the table. Never got it. Yeah.
Just give me the 6 months. Just give me the 6 months.
6 more months, man.
I've been here 10 years. Give me 6 months.
You've never seen me in the WWE for at least for another year.
You'd be on that Rey Mysterio schedule, huh?
I'm serious, man. I gave up a lot of money to come to WWE. I gave up, a lot of more than 6 figures to come to WWE. I was bought out of my contract, and I was willing to take that chance and go over, because I was like, man, I can make that money back, if I go out there and get over, go out there and put myself in a really good position. But if they would have gave me that big money contract, man, I'd have told, hey, man, I'm sitting on this.
Right.
Hey, bro, I'm on vacation.
I'll see you in a year.
See you in a year.
So were you at all assured, like, did you know that WWE had an awareness of you? Because you were one of the few guys that had never even dipped a foot into WWE. Did you have any knowledge of whether WWE was aware of what you could bring to the table, if they would have plans for you, if they were interested in you?
Well, every time, my contract would come up in WCW, I would always get a call, or someone would always let me know that there was a spot open for me if I wanted to, come over. They couldn't do a whole lot of talking just because of contracts, regulations and whatnot. But I was always aware that it was a spot for me in the WWE, as well as, I remember when I finally got there, I think I told the story before somewhere. I said, Linda McMahon, she goes, we finally got you. So it was really, really cool to actually be wanted in that company among all of the talent that was in WCW at that time to, rise through the ashes, from the bottom all the way to the top to, close the company down as dual champion. It was a great time for myself. And I knew I was going to be a WWE star, a superstar.
Superstar.
I just need a chance. Yeah.
So when you have your first chance, which is that episode of Raw, it was your first match in technically a WWE ring, but it was a WWE WCW ring. When they do that tester, when they do the one WCW match, and it's you and Buff Bagwell, and it kind of has become just a notorious disaster. I mean, it was a complete disaster. Do you panic at that point, like, oh no, how could this be, or did something else give you confidence?
I never panicked or anything like that. That match was what it was. It wasn't the match that I dreamt of or anything like that. It wasn't a match that I drew up, especially with Marcus Bagwell, because that's the guy that I had worked with. Literally, I could say I had worked with Marcus Bagwell 50 times, easy, perhaps more than that. On the road, overseas, house shows, TV. We had worked countless times, so it was like we could work in our sleep. But Marcus, at that time, after he had that neck surgery, he wasn't the same person that he was when we were working in our early days back in WCW. He wasn't the same guy as far as having the nimble feet and can fly like myself at that time, and myself, I had worked with Marcus on a couple of house shows before that night, and I knew he wasn't prepared to go out and perform, in a main event situation on WWE television. And I actually elaborated that to one of the agents. I'm not going to say his name. Actually, I can say his name. He's a friend of mine, Johnny Ace.
Okay.
I said, Johnny, I don't think, I don't think this is going to be too good. You know what I mean? I don't think Marcus is ready to go out tonight and pull this off. And he looks at me and he goes, "Book, it's out of my hands." And when he said that, I understood exactly, what he meant. This is WCW's time. Y'all got to go out there and pull this off no matter what. This is your moment, so get it done however you can. I respect that. We went out there and it didn't come off proper. Definitely Marcus wasn't prepared to perform that night due to certain reasons. And it was, the first time I had ever got to chant, you sucks, this is awesome.
This is boring.
Yeah,
right?
boring. Yeah, I got the boring chant. And it was first time in my career that I ever got that.
Did that shake you when you get it for the first time? Or you like,
No, I knew what was happening.
Okay.
I had my thing was I had performed for many years at a very high level.
Yeah.
I always said that I could go out and work with a broomstick. I could work with the guy that's working on a D level and make him look like he was an A worker. That was something I pride myself in. But in this situation on that night, no matter what I did, that wasn't going to happen. Suffer and then I have to go back and suffer what was coming. You know what I mean? And that's the Office. What happened out there? What happened, guys? And it wasn't a good night. It was one of those nights to where I said, man, I'm going to have to put this behind me. I'm going to have to go back out there and redeem myself. And more importantly, those guys knew I could work. They knew I was a performer. Dallas Page, he came in, and the following week, DDP and we went out there and we took it to another level. Dallas Page is not a guy that works on a, A level all the time, but his heart and how hard he worked is puts them in a position to where most guys what I got out of him I probably couldn't have got out of most. You know what I mean? So me and Dallas, we went out there and we beat each other up just to say, hey man, we can do this. WCW, there is talent that's coming out of the ruins and the ashes of WCW, and we're here to not only prove ourselves here, but we're willing to leave all of our accolades behind and show you guys we're willing to, be a part of the team. And I think that's what catapulted myself and guys like Dallas Page to, stick around and be a part of this thing.
So in WWE, like you talked about being a WWE superstar, but that's a specific thing. That means more than just doing well in WWE. That means that, WWE superstars, kind of everything about them symbolizes the company in a way. And it's, to me, and I've watched people have a lot of difficulty becoming WWE superstars. Like, this is a WWE guy when they're famous from somewhere else. And that's what, and I've told AJ Styles, and I've had him on, and I talk about it a lot, that to me is what is mind-blowing about the career of AJ Styles in WWE, is that within 365 days of being in WWE, AJ Styles' history was erased. Not in a bad way, in a way that when people looked at AJ Styles, they saw, oh, that's AJ Styles from WWE. And I feel like you did a similar thing. I feel like as much time as you spent in WCW, and as decorated as you were in WCW, and you were, there's really, when you take away the NWO, there's maybe 3 guys, maybe you, Goldberg, and Dallas Page, that are WCW originals, that are really on that level of work and fame and notoriety. How, I should say, were you able to make the transition into, no, I'm Booker T, WWE superstar, not the guy from WCW?
Well, I was willing to, take a back seat. You got to know how to, I tell my students this all the time. You got to know how to make it in the locker room before you ever have a chance at making it in the ring. And I'm for real when I say that right there. Mm-hmm. When I got to WWE, I knew how talented I was, and I was willing to go out there and prove myself in the ring by going out there and having 5-star matches on a nightly basis. But I was willing to, go through the character building as well. I was willing to, go out there and, try to, take my performance to another level through entertainment as well. And that's why I look at AJ Styles, and he's a perfect example of a guy who, left everything behind, but came to WWE and picked it up and now have taken it to a whole nother level. AJ Styles, at this point right now in his career, he's better than he's ever been. Yeah. I really understand, and, all the stuff that we've seen AJ Styles do in the past as far as, his in-ring prowess, he's better now as a performer than he's ever been, and he do a whole lot less. You know what I mean? So that's what's my thing. I was willing to fit in. I was willing to come out and take that script and make it the best I possibly could. But more importantly, when you put me in that position and you give me the ball, I'm going to score for you. I'm going to go out there and we're going to win. It's going to be one of those things where everyone on the team is going to be happy. It's going to be champagne bottles popping. You know what I mean? So that's what, I brought to the table. And same thing with AJ Styles, man. He goes out there and he performs. He score every time they give him the ball. And that's what this business is truly about. Guys that don't get hurt, guys that go out. I look at the Miz. I give the Miz a lot of credit, having a 10-year career, not being on the shelf and going out there, keeping the dollars flowing, in every aspect. I was one of those guys, and that's why I made it in WWE, and that's why still now, 17 years later, I'm still there, and it's an awesome feeling to still be relevant in this business. That's what's really, really cool. And I always talk about staying relevant, especially in the storm, of these young guys doing their thing, and they're coming up and they're going out there living that life, that I once upon a time, had to go out there and do as well. I'm coming up on the March 1st. I'll be 53 years old, and to still be relevant, in this business, and, still have my vigor and vibrance, for this business, man, it's awesome. It really, truly is. I
mean, and I don't know how you talk about relevance, especially in these Starbucks out here. You are as relevant as it gets.
Exactly my point. Yeah, exactly.
Now, and how much of that? Actually, here's the question, because to me, part of what you're talking about is also the level of commitment that you commit to the things that you're given to make them good, and that means, the ridiculous things that you've done, all the stuff that you did with Goldust that could have been a complete flop that ends up being this classic stuff that people still talk about. I mean, Vince McMahon dropping an N-bomb on you on TV and you having to have that reaction.
Yeah.
You getting beat up in a supermarket.
Grocery store, yeah.
And selling and just selling like no one's ever sold. I
was actually crying on the way out.
Is there anything that you've been presented with that you're like, no, I can't do that?
Yeah, there have been things that I've said no to. But it's always been, I've had my reasons why I would say no. I wouldn't say no because of an entertainment reason or anything like that, but certain things like, for instance, having my wife climb the cage, with,
sure.
in a certain way. And I'm like, well, that's my wife. She ain't climbing no cage,
right.
Stuff like that.
Right.
But there again, my wife, in the ring with the boogeyman taking the worms, that's perfectly fine.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And my thing is, I've always been about the entertainment.
Yeah.
I've always been about the show. I've heard a lot of, words about Booker T, through, on social media before about, Booker T. Only reason he's still in WWE is because he's a sellout. Only reason he's in WWE is because, he's one of Vince McMahon's boys. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Booker T, he's going to keep quiet. He's not going to say anything. I know the reason why I'm still here. I know my worth in the business, and it's been all because of the man that I am, the man that I always want to be, and more importantly, Sam, it's not about me. It's definitely not about me. It's truly about these young guys on the show that's doing their thing. I praise, the guys like Elias, that's going out there, doing their thing. Jason Jordan on the shelf right now, man. I'm sick about Jason Jordan being on the shelf. I was one to see that kid have his WrestleMania moment and go out there and do his thing. Seth Rollins and all these guys, Kevin Owens, rising up out of the ashes of, the independent scene for 15 years, the Finn Balor's of the world that I've seen do, spectacular and remarkable things, with Neville many, many years ago before making it to the big stage. That's why I'm still why I'm at today, as well as all of those great performances I gave in the rings with the Benoits of the world, to the Stone Cold Steve Austin and the grocery stores, of the world. That's what, my career has truly been about. It's been about the memory for the fan to have. I tell you, I was in Detroit, Michigan, on Saturday and Sunday for Comic-Con. And Astronomicon, that's what it was.
Okay.
And I was doing a panel, and it was I don't know, maybe 50, 75 people, sitting in a room there with me, and I had answered all the questions, Sam, and I got to the last guy before I was getting ready to crash up out of there and get ready to go and catch my flight. And it was a black man. He got the microphone and he goes, "Booker, I just want to thank you for everything that you've given me and my family, for all of these years. We've watched you and we love you." He said, "That's my son over there," which was sitting, a couple of feet from him. He said, "That's my son right there." And he said he's 13 years old. And he said he's had 4 heart surgeries since he was a baby. And he said he haven't been able to play sports or anything like that his whole life. He said, "But my son, he played sports through you on a video game and nobody could beat him." He said that I started crying. I broke down.
Yeah.
And that right there sums it up as far as what I've done, throughout my career. And hopefully, I've changed, a few people's lives, and hopefully I've given them that joy. Hopefully I've, been that beacon that they can live, that beacon of light that they can live through. If they're in situations like that, they find themselves in a dark place, they can refer back to Booker T's story and say, "Man, let me get up off my ass and move forward." That's what my career is summed up around more than anything. And I think, me being the person that I am, I think that right there is that's what I live for as far as the wrestling business goes.
It sounds like you're very optimistic too about the talent that's there now.
Very optimistic, man. These guys they're talent. They really are. They're talent. And I see the independent world moving. I was at a show maybe 5-6 months ago, and I was doing an autograph signing, and Adam Cole, he was there, and he come rolling in. He had his bag, and I was looking there. I said, man, when are they gonna sign you, man? He goes, man, I'm just waiting, man. I'm just waiting on the phone call, man. I just can't wait till they call, man. I say, look, bro. I said, they're going to call you, man. I said, you talent. I said, they're going to give you a call. And then at the Rumble there, I saw Adam Cole in the back, and he came up to me, and he goes, Booker. And I looked at him, I go, what's going on, man? I go, you made it. He goes, yeah, man, I made it. I was so happy to see that kid make it and live his dream out. I got a kid right now. His name's Rex Andrews. He came to me when he's 18 years old. He's a grown man now. He's in Japan, working with a company, Wrestle One. And he's, doing his thing, man. He's living it. He's in Roppongi, having fun, man. Hard rock, hanging out, that's what I love. And I think that's what keeps me young. That's what keeps me going. That's what keeps me, happy more than anything. I see so many guys that have gone through this business, man, and they are miserable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But when you see me every day, I'm smiling, man. I'm always on top of the world. Every day is paradise. You know what I mean? No matter where I'm at. Like I say, I was in Detroit. It was 12 degrees. It was snowing. A blizzard. And everybody say, man, how you doing, man? Another day in paradise, man. Another day. Another day. You know what I mean? So every day, man, for me, man, I'm living a dream that I never had coming up as a kid. Being in this business has been a blessing, and a life that I would not change for the world, honestly.
And I would love to call you out, but I've been there once every, 5 weeks on average for the last 13 months or so, and every time you've been there, I've never seen you have a bad day.
Hey, man, that's
I've never.
And the thing is, it's like that. Been through like that throughout my whole career. Everybody know when Booker T is upset.
Right.
Everybody know. Because I'm going to let everybody know that I'm upset. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And I got a lot of respect for that. Also, guys know exactly what Booker T is all about. I'm an open book. But most of the times, 98% of the time you see me, man, I'm going to be having fun. I'm going to be laughing. I'm going to be that way to the day that I die, man, till they put me in the ground. I know I got an expiration date, but I'm telling you right now, man, I'm going to embrace it, and I'm walking straight towards it, and I'm going to be smiling the whole way. And hopefully, the after party, it'll be just as good, Yeah, I'm serious.
That's good to hear, because I had assumed you were just saving up your bad days for the shows that Rosenberg was on, but I guess you're just always good. You're always good.
We know, Sam, you when we ran into each other at Survivor Series, I told you, I do the radio show with Booker, and I work with him at Reality Wrestling, and you're like, God, you must have fun all the time. And I'm like, absolutely. Because he's always smiling.
Yeah. And that's the one thing I've been told in my headset. Stop messing around with books so much, because I'm having too much fun. Real quick, Book. Triple H said in an interview, he said Ronda Rousey, is coming on in. She's signing the contract. Triple H is describing Ronda Rousey as being somebody who is going to change the landscape, meaning like this is not hey, we're going to have a big match at WrestleMania. Triple H believes that, or is saying Ronda Rousey is going to change the landscape in the WWE. Do you see Ronda Rousey as being that person?
Right now, as we speak, I honestly can say I don't know.
Yeah.
But what I can say is, I got a kid down in NXT right now. His name's Brendan Williams, the great black otaku shogun of the row. He's down in NXT right now. He's a former ex-football player. He played for the Texans, played for the Patriots, and then he came to my wrestling school. But he was a guy that was sitting in the audience, when he was playing for the Texans. He would be here on Saturday night watching the shows, going crazy. He was just like a big kid. He loved it, and that was his huge advantage that I thought he had. I say, man, you're going to make it, I say, because you love the business and people like you, more than anything. That second part was very, very Very pivotal, very pivotal. That second part, as far as people like you.
Right.
Ronda Rousey has always had an attitude to where a lot of people, she rubbed the wrong way. Coming into the business, you're going to have to change a whole lot of things, of course. Can she change the landscape of the business? That's a tall order, because we have some awesome women in the WWE as far as performers go, and I don't think there are any in the world, around the world, as good as Charlotte. So I'm gonna tell you right now, she better bring her game. She better study her game, and then be well prepared, because that's the only luck she's going to have in this business as far as surviving, as far as having staying power. Can she do it? Of course she can. I think she can. I'm banking on her, and I'm pulling for her. So in the end, we'll see.
On the way out, I guess this is the last question. I need to know. We can talk all the Corey Graves we want, but please, please tell me that the beef with Scott Stanford was real. Please tell me that was not a work. That couldn't have been a work, Booker. Please don't tell me that was a work.
It was a work.
No.
It was a work, too.
No.
What's crazy with Scott was he wanted to keep it going. He really wanted to. He asked me to. I'm like, bro, I'm a grown man. I'm not tweeting that. He really wanted to keep it going. No, but it was a work.
Yeah, you're like, Scott, if we're in the same room every week, if we keep this going any further, I'm gonna have to work myself into beating your ass on TV.
Exactly.
It's the only thing I can do.
That's the last out.
Well, everybody, if you're not already listening to Booker T's radio show and podcast, Heated Conversations with Brad Gilmore, it's a great listen, and you should absolutely be doing that. You should also be catching up on everything that happens in Reality of Wrestling, which is Booker's home promotion there in Houston. Where can they find all this stuff?
Catch Reality of Wrestling on Fight TV. That's FITE, Fight TV, streaming live 2 p.m. Central. Check your local listing every Sunday. So check it out. It's an awesome show. I think it's the best thing going out there as far as local talent coming up, getting a chance to shine. Young guys going out there, getting a chance to, prove their worth as far as moving up in the world of professional wrestling, as well as, I got some awesome young people doing great things here, man. I appreciate you for giving me the time, Sam.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you coming on, and I look forward to seeing you again in the future on one of these kickoff shows.
Hey, bro, we got Vegas, bro. We got Vegas coming up, right? You there? You there? You in Vegas?
I'm not in Vegas.
You in Vegas? When the next one? When our next show?
Whatever after Vegas. Backlash.
I'll be there, baby. We go hook up. You know what? And what's crazy is Mansouri. I already gave Mike Mansouri the call, and he said, "Man, I'm glad you're back, man. Trouble is back.
Yeah,
shucky ducky, quack moments for everybody, man. I appreciate it, dog.
And my prediction is that it will be GOODT.
Good. Real good.
Thanks, Book. How great is Booker T? I do want to tell you, if you missed the open of the show, I talked about Stitcher Premium and how you can now get Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast as part of Stitcher Premium. Here's how it works. If you go to Stitcher.com/notsam, you sign up for Stitcher Premium, and here's what you get. You get Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast each and every week. First thing, ad-free. No more ads on Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast. You'll be able to sit back, enjoy the whole show. No ads whatsoever. Second thing you're going to get, a bonus show. In fact, 2 bonus shows every single month, more or less. Every other Monday, really. So you could end up with 3 bonus shows a month. Every other Monday, I'm going to sit down with a friend, a family member, my wife, somebody who doesn't necessarily watch wrestling all the time. And I'm going to convince them of how cool wrestling is by doing a watch-along with one of the worst shows on the WWE Network. You're going to be able to get to help me pick which show I put on display for this person. Right now, I'm thinking about the Triple Cage episode of WCW Monday Nitro, but there's a lot to go into, and I'm really, really excited about doing this show for you guys, but the only way you're going to see it or hear it is if you sign up to Stitcher Premium at Stitcher.com/notsam. It's $5 a month. It's $35 a year. You can try it for free. But $35 a year, it's nothing. It's the best way to support this podcast. And if you sign up for Stitcher Premium, not only do you get everything that Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast has to offer, but you'll also get everything that Stitcher Premium has to offer in general. All the shows that do premium content, you'll be able to have access to if you sign up to Stitcher Premium through Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast. So go to Stitcher.com/notsam. Help me support the show and enjoy a bonus watch-along show that you'll be able to turn on the WWE Network. You'll be able to watch the show as we're commenting on it. It's going to be great. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let's continue on with this podcast.
Here is Sam Roberts.
Booker, all hail. King Booker, I think the world of Booker. And it's interesting because we touched on it, but I think we as wrestling fans need to get out of this mind space of, well, is it a work or is it a shoot? And is it somebody getting buried or is somebody going over? It's very like I think we forget sometimes that these are human beings that might just be goofing around, because you go, well, if it's a work, because there are some people who still theorize. There are some conspiracy theorists who still think that the Corey Graves Booker T thing is a shoot, not a work. I mean, I will tell you, as I talked about in the interview, I've never seen an ounce of tension between Booker and Corey Graves, and I know for a fact that Booker was ready to be off commentary months ago. He wants to be at home with his family. He wants to be a part of WWE. He likes doing the kickoff shows. He doesn't want to be doing 3 hours of commentary every Monday and then coming in for the pay-per-views. I just don't think at this point in his life it's something that he has a passion to do. He will do it, and he'll do a great job at it, but it's not something that he has a desire for, you know what I mean? So, but there's a different, you go, well, if it's a work, who benefits from this? Corey Graves doesn't look better for it, and it's not like Booker T's coming back to address it, and it's not, because there's a difference between a work where it's writers in a room with Vince McMahon coming up with storylines that they're going to play out on television, and a guy who's doing a radio show who's just kind of busting his friend's balls by starting a bunch of trouble. This is just like you busting balls with anybody that you're at work with. That's all this is. We're really overthinking it. And I talked about it last week on State of Wrestling, that's what I thought it was. It's just two buddies goofing with each other. And they happen to be two buddies that we care about because we're wrestling fans. So I think it was interesting. I think it was a great social experiment. And I'm glad it happened. And I'm glad that Booker T was a part of Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast this week. Make sure you check out Reality of Wrestling and Heated Conversations, the show that Booker does out there in Houston. Now, speaking of shows, I got access to an exclusive advanced screening of Andre the Giant, the HBO documentary that's coming out in April. Bill Simmons produced it. Only a few of us. There was only a handful of us there. It was Peter Rosenberg and I went. And Laura Stiles from Hot 97 was with him. Brian Koppelman, the creator of Billions, was there. We spoke a little bit. Brian Koppelman is a giant wrestling fan from like the 60s and 70s. Like, he's just an old school wrestling guy. So I had a lot of fun talking to him about old school wrestling. Mark Henry was there because he works with Dave LaGreca on the Busted Open show on Sirius, and LaGreca was there as well. So there were a handful of media types there. And a lot of empty seats in the theater room that we were in because, this is it's not for the public just yet. But I was a little skeptical, to tell you the truth, of this Andre documentary because to me I felt like it's not going to live up to the hype that is being created around it. And I've heard all the stories. I've heard all the Andre drank a lot of booze stories. I've heard, oh, he was a good guy, but if he didn't like you, like I've heard all the Andre stories, right? Totally wrong. And from the moment you sit down and you start looking at the footage that was acquired to make this documentary, when you start hearing from the people who were interviewed for it, I mean the entire cast of The Princess Bride, I mean Hogan, I mean Vince, I mean Shane, I mean Andre's siblings, Andre's family, Mean Gene, like it was everybody that you didn't know you would want. Tim White. You remember Tim White, the referee? He traveled everywhere with Andre the Giant. He has a big part in this. David Shoemaker, who does a great wrestling podcast. He is like this wrestling historian who used to be over at The Ringer with Bill. What was it called? Grantland with Bill Simmons, and now he's at The Ringer with Bill. But David Shoemaker is a big part of this thing, going down the life and times of Andre the Giant. But it really was a remarkable documentary. One of the best, if not the best, wrestling docs that I've ever seen, and I've seen them all. If you liked the Ric Flair 30 for 30 documentary, you're going to love this Andre documentary because it goes past where the Ric Flair documentary went. I thought the Ric Flair 30 for 30 was more of a celebration of the character of Ric Flair, which I don't have a problem with at all. The Andre movie, it's this amazing thing because when you get to for me anyway, when you get to the place in the movie where they talk about his death, you start looking at photos and footage of him as you're watching the movie in an entirely different way. Like you start to see a life in this man that is quite remarkable because he's been dead since 1993. None of us ever got the chance to meet Andre. None of us listening to this got the chance to meet Andre. But the way this story is told and the imagery that's in this movie really leaves you feeling like you're cheering for this guy, you're in love with this guy, you're rooting for him, you know him, and you get to this place where you know it's coming, but when they say January 1993 he passed away, you're going, no, he can't have. Like you start to buy in, even though so much of this documentary is the story behind the myth, behind the mythos of what Andre was, you start to buy into the mythos. And you start going, no, he can't be gone. He's Andre. Like, there's no way. And I guess through the footage of Andre, the stories that are being told by people who knew him, it's just, and again, of course, it's very flattering towards Andre. They do get into things he did that were not nice. They do get in. It's not like the whole time they're just describing him as, oh, he's a gentle giant who just loved everybody and everybody loved him. They do talk about people who he didn't like, who didn't like him, but never really in a truly negative way. I'll tell you, I've interviewed Hulk Hogan about WrestleMania 3, and I'm not the only one. Hulk Hogan has talked about WrestleMania 3 a lot. And when he tells the stories about not knowing if Andre was going to put him over or not, you kind of feel like he might be working a little bit, like you kind of feel like, okay, he's just trying to still play up what a big deal this was and how Andre was this mythical creature. But when you watch the movie and that story gets told, far more detail is put into it than has been in the past, and it really starts to make sense as to what the picture looked like around that time. So a lot of time is spent on Andre as a person. A lot of time is spent on how he gets started in wrestling and then moving through the territories and what that really meant in that time. And then there's a good chunk spent on that Hogan-Andre match and how it became such a culturally significant moment. It shows the guy with just a tremendous amount of vulnerability that you have never seen in Andre. Far more vulnerability than anything else has ever shown Andre to have. And there was this great balance of an obvious cooperation from the WWE in the sense that the talent that was interviewed and the footage that was used and the story that was told, but it was clearly done by an independent filmmaker outside of WWE in the sense that Hogan is such a big part of it, in the sense that it's not the WWE narrative that's necessarily being told. The WWE narrative is heard, but it's not the sole voice of the film, which is one of the things that makes it so special. But I think once this thing airs on HBO, it's going to do even more for Andre than the 30 for 30 did for Flair. It's gonna really create a new, rejuvenated love affair for this character, Andre the Giant, who is truly immortal. And maybe we'll have a conversation in April when the movie comes out on HBO about who in wrestling possibly fits that mold. It's interesting because I think that Andre's personal life was so private that his character was never damaged. I think as much as Hulk Hogan will live forever in the character, his private life, especially in the last 5 years, but in the last, 10, 12 years with the reality show and everything in his personal life became so public that I think it does damage it. I don't think he'll ever be looked at as this immortal Hulk Hogan because we all know too much. But, he's still an icon. It's just not the same deal as Andre the Giant. The only person that I can think of, same thing with the Ultimate Warrior, same thing with Randy Savage. I think the Ultimate Warrior and Randy Savage could have been these guys that are kind of like mysterious and we only know them as the character and they were so intense and out of this world. But, Randy Savage doing all the rap and the Hogan stuff at the end, not at the end of his life, but at the end of his public life, really. And the Ultimate Warrior, getting political and homophobic and stuff like that before he came back to WWE, that it does affect how us fans will look at that legacy. I think right now The Undertaker is probably the only person, the only wrestler who might be in a conversation with that type of legacy. But it's tough to have that conversation. If you guys have opinions on it, you can always tweet. But it's tough to have that conversation before you guys see the movie. But make sure you got HBO or HBO Go or HBO Now or whatever you need to do, because April is when that movie comes out. And you shan't be disappointed, just like I hope you won't be disappointed in the top 5 stories I've picked out for this week's State of Wrestling, which goes down right now.
It's now time for this week's State of Wrestling.
All right, State of Wrestling time. And, of course, I got my people from the Facebook page, facebook.com/notsam, watching this live. So maybe I'll be reading some of their comments as we go, reading the top 5 stories that happened this week in the world of pro wrestling. And this week it's in no particular order, but it's really more 5. It's a couple of stories and then a couple of things that really just struck me into what is my top 5 stories this week on the State of Wrestling. This is story number 5, and it's only story number 5 because I've been so anxious to talk about it. But it's something that really hit me as I was watching Raw on Monday. And, I'll watch Raw, and sometimes, I always enjoy it to some level. Sometimes it's like, okay, you can kind of do other things while it's on. It's like, okay, this is now comfort food. This is McDonald's. Like, I watch Raw because it's what I enjoy, but this is just an episode of Raw. That happens a lot. And then sometimes there's segments where you go, whoa, and you have to stop what you're doing. If I am running WWE, if there's anybody out there who has the ear of Vince McMahon and the people running WWE, then please listen to me when I tell you. You don't have to do anything abrupt. You don't have to do anything immediate. You can still, if you want to go to WrestleMania, you want to put the world title on Roman Reigns, you want to do Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns, you want to do John Cena versus whoever, do whatever you want to do. I don't care. I will give you, from now until WrestleMania, to just have fun, do whatever you want. I don't care. Whatever guys you think should be the guy, put that person in charge and let WrestleMania come and go. I'll give you the rest of the year. But the day after WrestleMania is when the next year of WWE symbolically begins. And if I could have any influence on the WWE right now, it would be to put all of your money. If I were a betting man, if I were starting my own promotion, if I were put in charge of the WWE, I would put every company dollar I could behind The Miz, Braun Strowman, and Elias. That right there, those 3 men are the future of your company. That segment, first of all, every Miz segment that he's in works, and most of them shouldn't. But because it's The Miz and because The Miz is the person that he is now, he can pull off absolutely anything. He was the best part of Raw 25, and consistently, he is, as somebody who watches, The Miz is the one person who consistently is doing segments where you look up. If you're on your computer and you're, like for me, I'll watch Raw while I'm looking up news stories for the radio show the next morning. But when The Miz is on, I look up from my computer and I watch what The Miz is doing. When Braun Strowman is on, I look up and I see what's Braun Strowman going to smash tonight. When Elias is on, I look up and I watch Elias. Because those three guys are the end-all, be-all. And, get this, they are homegrown talents. Can you believe this? Those three guys, if there is any influence I could have on the WWE, it's to bet the farm on those three guys. They're your present and your future. And there could be, Elias has a weird gimmick. Braun Strowman is a big guy. And The Miz has a history of not being taken seriously. But we need to put all of that aside and just watch the performances that all three of those guys are giving on a regular basis. I mean, the segment on Raw this week with Elias and Braun Strowman was the best segment on the show. The best segment on the show. I'm talking promos, I'm talking matches, I'm talking whatever you want. The best segment on Raw this week was the Braun Strowman and Elias thing. And I was thinking the same thing as you. Some people said that they did not like what Braun Strowman did because it turned him into a cartoon character. They did not like that Braun Strowman took out that standing base or the upright base. I called it a standing base on Twitter. And there were honestly people that were like, "Don't you mean upright base, you freaking idiot?" Yeah, fine, you band geek. That's what I meant. But when he takes out that bass and he starts playing it and he actually starts singing, and I was thinking the same thing as you. I don't want Braun to be singing. I want him to be a monster. But guess what? He pulled off the singing thing. If you're being honest, like that thought creeps into our minds. And sometimes we go, oh, I don't like this. He shouldn't be singing. He's a monster. But what we have to do is acknowledge that thought and then allow what's going to happen, then make the judgment of whether or not it works. A lot of times, stuff like that will happen and people will make the judgment on this isn't going to work, so it didn't work. Do you know what I mean? Whereas in reality, it shouldn't have worked. And it did. And I'll tell you why. Because Braun Strowman convinces us. And the more he talks, the more it feels like his character is expanding. It doesn't feel like it's being pigeonholed. It doesn't feel like it's turning into something it's not. It just feels like this monster. We all know he's a person. We've been watching long. We know monster. He's not actually a monster. We know Braun Strowman in real life is a person. And the more he talks and the more he does entertaining stuff, the more it expands his character. What saved Braun Strowman is the fact that in that segment, he's carrying the upright bass on his back like a guitar, which is hilarious. He's a big giant man, and he has to, instead of using a guitar like mere mortals, he uses this big instrument as a guitar because he's so big. It's great. It's hilarious, right? What saved him was that he teased like he was going to hit Elias with the upright bass. Then Elias puts his guitar down, so he puts the bass down, and they, engage in fisticuffs. And you think, okay, well, obviously. Then Elias leaves the ring, and he chases him down, and he actually hits him. He picks up the upright bass over his head and slams it down, and I cringed as that giant wood instrument came down across the back of Elias because it's so big. We've all seen those things before in high school class or whatever, high school music class or whatever. They're so big. And the idea that it got smashed over Elias's back, it's like it took this spot, which is hitting your opponent over the head with a guitar. And that spot has been done so many times that we don't necessarily take it seriously. But that one we do, because that's like a guitar, only 25 times the size. So I thought when Braun Strowman did actually break the upright bass across the back of Elias, it made the segment, it maintained Braun Strowman as a monster to be taken seriously, and I just thought it was such a positive thing, and I really firmly and truly believe that, like, it's not like when I look at Braun Strowman, Elias, and The Miz, I go, okay, well, if I had to do something with somebody on this roster, what would I do? I guess those are my guys. No, it's like I watch that, and as a creative person, I go, oh my God, I wish I had those players on my team. Like if I'm running, if it's 99 again, and I'm Eric Bischoff, I'm looking past the main event. I'm looking to who's going to give me years of amazing service, who's the future of this industry, and I've got my targets locked onto those three guys. And the fact that they're homegrown talent makes them exactly what the WWE wants, and they're varied. They're different. All three of them represent a different thing. You out of everybody you talk to, depending on where they're from, depending on what they do, depending on what they like, will have a different favorite out of the three. And it's a conversation you can have. But I can't, for the life of me, believe that there is anybody in that company right now that is more long-term valuable than those three guys. And I think if you want Roman Reigns to leave WrestleMania with the championship, that's fine. I don't think there's any reason to rush those three guys. But to me, that's where you've got to look going forward. There have been rumors about a match at WrestleMania for the Intercontinental title between Braun Strowman and The Miz. If it's me and I'm running things, I'm watching what's going on right now. And I'm going, whoa, 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 whoa. I know that was the plan in my head. But let's change where we're going, because I think that there is a bigger potential here. Let's have, Roman's leaving WrestleMania as the champion, that's fine. But Braun and The Miz are not wrestling at WrestleMania. Because after WrestleMania, The Miz is going to start going after Roman Reigns. And The Miz is going to be the one that dethrones Roman Reigns. If it's me, Roman Reigns, fine, we can accept. He leaves WrestleMania as Universal Champion. I mean, he might not, who knows, but that's, it's been a given since last year. People have been talking about that thing since last year, and storyline-wise, it still makes sense that that's where they're going. So that's what I think is going to happen there. But if it's me, The Miz is the guy that dethrones Roman Reigns for that Universal Championship. Whether it's at Money in the Bank, whether it's at SummerSlam, whether it's at one of the pay-per-views in the meantime, in between time. That's Miz's spot. And we don't get the Braun Strowman-Miz match until Braun Strowman is challenging for the Universal Championship. And when the Miz wins the Universal Championship, this isn't going to be treated like his WWE Championship reign was, where, it was kind of like Jinder Mahal, which I feel like was unfair to Jinder Mahal. Every single match was cheating. He couldn't conceivably win anything by himself. He didn't have any real challengers. That wasn't Jinder so much as it was Miz. But I think now is when you take it more seriously, right? Now is when you let Miz beat Roman for that Universal Championship. Because let's be honest, the Miz would have a reason to demand a title shot. He beat Roman for the Intercontinental title, so who's to say he couldn't beat him for the Universal title? Have the Miz win it. Have him beat a couple people. Have him go forward and win these things. Then you can come out of it and have Braun challenge him. Braun's not going to be the first guy to challenge the Miz. Let the Miz go for maybe I would probably do something with the Miz and Finn Balor. You could do something with the Miz. There's a ton of people. Miz could work with anybody. But you have Braun Strowman beat the Miz for the Universal title. And then next year at WrestleMania, who's knocking on Braun Strowman's door wanting that title back? But Brock Lesnar. Then you've got a Brock Lesnar-Braun Strowman match where Braun Strowman is defending the Universal Championship. I'd say give Brock Lesnar the Royal Rumble win next year. Have by then Braun Strowman has beaten The Miz. This year, over the next 365 days, I would go Roman Reigns loses to The Miz, loses to Braun Strowman. Brock Lesnar wins the Royal Rumble 2019. Brock Lesnar goes to WrestleMania 35 to try to avenge losing the title at WrestleMania 34 and faces Braun Strowman for that championship. To me, that's money. And honestly, I might have Braun Strowman win the thing, because who knows how much longer Brock's going to be there. It might be time for Brock to just, start doing the favors. It might be time for Brock to start to cash in on the Brock Lesnar investment, because really the only reason you've been building Brock Lesnar is because it's good for money. People will pay to see him as long as he keeps winning, but also because it's going to mean that much more when he finally loses. When Brock finally loses, it's going to mean even more. So I think that that's all part of it. But yeah, for me, that's where you go. And while all that's going on, you still have Elias right there, just waiting. Scott says, I want everything Cena. Okay. John Sosis, can we talk about Braun in the Mixed Match Challenge? He is so fucking fun. There's a line between Monster and Big Show cartoon that Braun can play. Scott, John, I 100% agree with you. That's something to keep in mind with Braun, is that we can't get mad that Braun actually starts showing personality, because he has the ability to show personality, right? He's not this cartoon. And I'm not worried about Braun Strowman becoming a cartoon, because he's been built so well over the last year or two. So yeah, I mean, I just think it's all upside with that, and that's what I would do. And I would just have Elias waiting in the cut the whole time. Maybe do something with Elias and AJ. Maybe, I don't know, because I just think that Elias on first notice, I don't think people realized how good he was, but he is as good as it gets, this Elias character. Let's move on to story number 4, and that's I'm watching Raw, and I don't think it's been officially announced, but I'm watching Raw, and they run local commercials for whatever show WWE is running, and they're running this commercial for Madison Square Garden in March. WWE's running Madison Square Garden in March, and it's a house show. But one of the advertised matches on the house show is a mixed tag team match between Nikki Bella and John Cena as a team. So I guess Nikki's coming back. I don't think that was ever confirmed. I don't think that it was ever officially announced, like, okay, Nikki's back and she's, after the Royal Rumble, she's coming back to wrestle. But I would have to believe, based on this commercial, that Nikki Bella is indeed coming back. So, and by the way, Asa in the Facebook is exactly right. He says, while all this is going on, while you're going from Roman to Miz to Braun, have Elias holding the Money in the Bank briefcase. 100%. 100%. Because then after next year's WrestleMania, when Braun Strowman beats Brock Lesnar, that's when Elias starts hinting. Or who knows? Who knows where we'll be? We can reassess, and maybe Elias does a Seth Rollins-style cash-in at WrestleMania 35. As crazy as it sounds, we could be there. We could be there by the time we get to WrestleMania. It's very, very possible. But yeah, so WrestleMania 35, that is. Story number 4 was just the idea that Nikki Bella is coming back because she's going to be wrestling a house show in March, and I saw a commercial for it. So that's very, very interesting. Speaking of the women, that brings me to story number 3. Sasha Banks and Bayley. Again, another story from Raw this week. It's been interesting as I've been watching. I am so hungry. I am fiending for a Sasha Banks heel turn. I just think that Sasha she's perfect as a heel. If you guys are familiar with her NXT stuff, and we used to talk about her NXT stuff all the time on the podcast years ago, but if you guys are familiar with the NXT stuff, she was great as a heel. Sasha's ratchet. No, she's not. It was awesome. It was a great time in the career of Sasha Banks, and that's, to me, where that character should be. I do see, like, especially this week, I was just kind of paying attention to the dynamic between Bayley and Sasha, and I kind of feel like the Sasha heel turn is a bit of a fake out. and that we are going to see a Bayley heel turn. That's what it feels like to me. It feels like we're going to see a Bayley heel turn. Now, I personally would rather see a Sasha Banks heel turn. And even though it's a little bit more predictable, I just think that Sasha Banks would do a better job. I think if Sasha Banks were a bad guy, it would give fans an opportunity to appreciate her as a bad guy. And when she eventually turned back to a good guy after this run, she would be a much, much, much bigger star. Whereas if Bayley's a bad guy and Sasha Banks is a babyface, I don't know that will long-term benefit anybody, because I think Bayley is a natural good guy, And maybe that's just because I'm going back to where they were most successful in NXT. But I think that Sasha is working in the last several weeks on a whole nother level. But I think she's got I just think she'd benefit greatly from being a bad guy, and I'm worried that it's going to be Bayley who ends up in that spot. Now, the benefit to all this is that I absolutely see an implosion coming with those two. And I do think, and call me crazy, I know there's a limited amount of room on that WrestleMania card, and every year, like last year, the Intercontinental Championship was on the pre-show. It's a very limited amount of space, especially with the amount of specialty matches you're bound to have every year at WrestleMania. But based on the fact that where we are with the women's revolution, how much farther we are than we were 2 years ago, meaning now we're seeing a women's elimination chamber match. We saw the women's Royal Rumble close the Royal Rumble show. You've got genuine superstars. Let's be honest for a second. When I'm going over that list of Elias and Braun and Miz, I feel the exact same way about Asuka. You've got a women's division like you've never had before. I don't think it's that far-fetched to believe that this year at WrestleMania we will get 3 women's matches. We've had 2 before. I don't think it's so far-fetched to believe we'll get 3 and the Ronda Rousey match. I think if the WWE wants to be progressive, if the WWE wants to talk about the women's revolution, I think what would be amazing for WrestleMania, and again, it's controversial because it would end up with somebody missing a spot. There'd be male competitors that wouldn't get a spot because of this, but so be it. I think there'd be an interest, and I just think that the story has to be told right. You got 2 weeks till Elimination Chamber, but then after Elimination Chamber, I think you got 6 weeks until WrestleMania, and 6 weeks is plenty of time in 2018 to tell a story. In my mind, you go forward to WrestleMania, you've got Charlotte defending the SmackDown Women's title, maybe against Asuka, maybe against Becky, who knows. You've got Alexa Bliss defending the Raw Women's title, maybe against Asuka, maybe against Nia Jax. I hope that they don't do that triple threat thing with Nia, but, I would like to see something where maybe Alexa gets involved in the Nia Jax-Asuka match at the pay-per-view, and Asuka wins because she's got to win, and then she picks Charlotte because she never picked an opponent. So maybe you have Asuka versus Charlotte, Alexa Bliss versus Nia. You've got Ronda Rousey in some kind of mixed tag team thing with Stephanie McMahon that people have been talking about. And then, on top of all that, on top of the Ronda Rousey match, on top of the 2 women's title matches, I think it would be super cool and progressive and forward-thinking and exactly what the women's evolution needs. No titles, no nothing. A grudge match. Sasha Banks versus Bayley. Because imagine what a big deal that would be for WrestleMania. Sasha Banks versus Bayley. No title. No triple threat. No battle royal. You know what I mean? It's just these 2 women putting on an amazing match. And those 2 women have the ability to put on an unbelievable match. Go over to the first NXT TakeOver Brooklyn. NXT TakeOver Brooklyn 1. That was a show that featured Tyler Breeze versus Jushin Thunder Liger. That was a show that featured a ladder match between Kevin Owens and Finn Balor. And that was a show where the night got stolen by Sasha Banks versus Bayley. That's a match I want to see at WrestleMania. That's a match I want to see with no titles on the line. And that's a story. If you tell me the Sasha Banks Bayley story, regardless of who's the good guy and who's the bad guy, because you could go either way and tell an amazing story. If you put as much energy into that story as you did into the video on Monday, showing me Asuka by the numbers and explaining why she's such a major, major superstar, then that's one of my most highly anticipated matches of WrestleMania. And let those two bring it. I am right now putting it on the table. What I want to see at WrestleMania is no titles on the line. Grudge match. Sasha Banks versus Bayley. And I highly anticipated matches of WrestleMania. And that's what let those two bring. That's what would take us to a different place. That's what would take us to a different place. Lawrence saying, too easy. Put the U.S. and Raw Tag Team titles on the pre-show where they sadly belong at the moment. Plenty of room for the women matches. But I don't think, and Scott says Nia needs to win a belt. Well, Nia can beat Alexa at WrestleMania. You know, that could be a nice crowning thing for Nia, maybe. I wouldn't mind Alexa beating Nia either. Like, I think that match could go either way. But I just think that, and it has to be on the main show. Sasha versus Bayley. You know, they give them the opportunity to steal WrestleMania, and I'd be all on board. So while we're talking about women and Ronda Rousey, Triple H said that Ronda Rousey is going to change the landscape. This is what Triple H said. Ronda Rousey is going to change the landscape. Of course, she's signing her contract at Elimination Chamber, which, you know, I mean, Ronda Rousey is a huge star. Just the fact that she's going to be in the building, just the fact that she's there to sign the contract makes it like, I'm not going to be there in Las Vegas, but it makes me wish that I was there just so I could be a part of everything that is Ronda Rousey right now. I think it's got the potential to be a game changer, but it's an interesting thing because in order for it to be not a game changer, a landscape changer, in order for it to be a landscape changer, Ronda needs to work at least a somewhat full-time schedule. I don't think she needs to be on every single show, but she needs to work a lot more than Brock Lesnar works. Like, she needs to be a pretty regular part of the show. And in order for it to be something that changes the landscape, she has to be really, really good at professional wrestling. And that remains to be seen. So I think that she's got a lot of training to do. I think if you've got her to a long-term contract, I think it's smart to start her slow. You know, I don't think she should wrestle before WrestleMania. I think her appearances should be very, very limited. You know, I think WrestleMania should feel very, very special. I like the idea of putting her in some kind of tag match where she can be very, very protected. But, you know, not long after WrestleMania, she's going to be expected to be brought up to speed. Because let's be honest, for Ronda Rousey to attract the amount of attention that she's been attracting, we need to believe that she could be the champion in that women's division. So that complicates things a little bit because if she's not that good, it kind of takes away everything from her. So that part has to be protected, and I think they will protect that. But we've just never had anything like this where, like Mike Tyson, for instance, was a landscape changer, but if Mike Tyson had been around as a regular competitor, I don't think he would have been because eventually we would forget about the celebrity of Mike Tyson and just be like, oh, it's another Mike Tyson match because he wouldn't be that good at pro wrestling. He's a great boxer. So if Ronda Rousey doesn't become a great professional wrestler quick, we run the risk of being like, okay, like I get it. Ronda's famous. Here's another Ronda Rousey match. She's got to be really, really good. She has to, I mean, and it's a tough spot for her to be in because she has to be very, very good at this. And I hope she will be because, you know, I think it could be a landscape changer. But, you know, when you've got people like Charlotte, when you've got people like Asuka, when you got people like Nia Jax and Alexa Bliss, like when you got Sasha Banks working at the level that she's been working at, it's a lot to live up to. It's a lot to live up to. And when you haven't done pro wrestling before, because Ronda hasn't. She's done MMA. You know. Now, Shayna Baszler was able to make the transition pretty seamlessly, but Ronda's got to be even better than Shayna Baszler because at least Shayna Baszler has the benefit of starting in NXT and working those live events. Like, Ronda can't do anything because of who she is without a giant spotlight being shown on it. So she's going to have to get in a hell of a lot of reps down at the Performance Center or wherever they do it. before she gets in there because she's got to blow people's minds. And I do kind of hope that she does. All right. Top story of the week. Rumor. Single-branded pay-per-views. Is WWE switching back to single-branded pay-per-views? Dave Meltzer reported this. Of course, Dave Meltzer also reported that Corey Graves and Booker T had tremendous heat in between them. But rumor. After WrestleMania, starting with Backlash, what the reports are saying is that that Backlash will be a dual-branded pay-per-view. And people are getting that from, I guess, Ticketmaster. The people who bought tickets to the show or the people who might be interested in tickets to that show, Ticketmaster reached out to them and said, hey, just so you know, it's going to be a dual-branded show. Which led people to believe, whoa, if that's dual-branded. Now, I won't comment on whether or not the shows are going to be dual-branded because that news hasn't been released yet. But I don't think it's. I think it's a good idea for the quality of the shows that the shows go back to being dual branded, because I don't think only half of the pay-per-views have been really great. You know, like and most of them have been Raw pay-per-views just because of the star power, like, you know, putting Samoa Joe and Brock Lesnar onto Great Balls of Fire. Shows like that were really, really spectacular. But then you have like 3 pay-per-views headlined by the same match. You know, you like Jinder Mahal, Randy Orton headlined like 3 different pay-per-views. You had I don't know, you fell into this thing where stories started being told over multiple pay-per-views because you had to fill these pay-per-views because you're doing one every 2 weeks. So I think it's a good idea for WWE to go back to doing one pay-per-view a month, if that's what they're going to do. I don't know. But part of me wishes they would keep some of these things single-branded just because of the opportunity it allows people. You know, there was a moment when the initial draft split happened where there still weren't more than like 13 pay-per-views a year. It's just the gaps between the single-branded pay-per-views were longer, meaning if you've got 2 months, like let's say you're doing what you're doing this time, right? You've got January Royal Rumble, February is a Raw pay-per-view, March is a SmackDown pay-per-view, April is WrestleMania, May is a Raw pay-per-view, June is a SmackDown pay-per-view, July is a Raw pay-per-view, August is SummerSlam. Like, I wouldn't be so opposed to stretching pay-per-views out like that. It would definitely make people hungry for stories to get paid off. But that's probably the best of both worlds, is to if you stretched it out like that, where you still kept the single-branded pay-per-views but just did less shows. I think that could be good for programming. Just because when you do dual-branded shows, you're gonna end up with people like Rusev Day. Like, would Benjamin and Gable have the opportunity to shine? Would, you know, like all these guys that at one point in the year were pretty low on the roster that have now been able to jump up because they've had room at these pay-per-views. I mean, I also think part of it is you got to spread the talent out a little more evenly. Raw is talent heavy. You know, if you move some of those Raw guys over to SmackDown, I think you'd have a lot more of an easy time getting people to show up to SmackDown shows. It says they could split TV and just have pay-per-view features for both brands. There doesn't have to be any mixing until they could leave TV split and just have the pay-per-view features. There doesn't have, I don't know what you're talking about. Big Four / Money in the Bank. Meaning that there doesn't have to be any single-branded pay-per-views at all? That we go back to a 5 pay-per-view a year model? That's never going to happen. I think we've gotten used to there being at least 12 to 14 pay-per-views a year. I don't think we're ever going to get back to a place where we're only doing a Big Four or Big Five. Like, I don't think that's ever going to happen. We have to do monthly pay-per-views at least. The issue now is we're doing them every 2 to 3 weeks. If you make the pay-per-view dual-branded, what's the point in the brand split? I don't think that it leaves the brand split pointless. This is what happened with the last brand split, is you start combining the pay-per-views, then you combine the champions into, then people start floating back and forth. Well, this time for one night only they're over here, for one night only they're over there. And how do you promote Survivor Series? The one time of the year when Raw and SmackDown go head-to-head in one time of the year when Raw and SmackDown compete in head-to-head competition. That's not true anymore. Unless the dual branded pay-per-views are not, they wouldn't compete with each other. They would just have separate. That's possible. I don't know. The other thing that you have to keep in mind is you could still do network specials, right? You could still televise house shows, which I think would be interesting. If you do less pay-per-views, but SmackDown is going to be in the Barclays Center and you just put it on TV and you did some cool stuff there. I do wish that more house shows were televised. I wish that were utilized a little bit more, and I think that could be a way out. That you're just make super shows instead of pay-per-views. Do your 12 pay-per-views a year, make them dual branded, but then do a Saturday night's main event on the network. Make those, do specials. Saturday night's main event. Make a King of the Ring tournament. We're doing a house show in whatever city this is. Let's turn it into the King of the Ring this year. Do stuff like that to separate the brands and make it so that the same way the house show is SmackDown specific, this is a SmackDown specific Super Show, and it's going to be exclusively on the network. I think that could be good. Yeah, Franklin says they hijacked too much talent from SmackDown in the last shakeup, and I think that's true. I think pay-per-views should have those special entrances like before. Remember, the entrance ramp was always different. If we don't have pyro, I don't. Plus, here's the thing: they used to build sets. Well, they didn't. They used to not build those sets, and then for a while they were building unique sets for each event, and then they weren't anymore. And I think it does become more and more difficult to do that in HD, and I don't know. I'm not so hung up on that. I would like it, but I'm not. I don't think it makes that huge of a difference. But yeah, do Tuesday in Texas. Do stuff like that. Ring of Honor did that televised house show last week in North Carolina. This is my first Ring of Honor show, and I see what the hype's about. Well, exactly. Lawrence just wrote that on Facebook. What if you utilized Facebook? What if you said, okay, well, we're gonna put. We've got a house show in the WWE. What if Starrcade was on Facebook? Wouldn't you have watched it? If they put the Starrcade house show on Facebook, I think I would watch it on Facebook Live. I think that'd be exciting, and it would maybe, although I think it has to, and maybe then you put it right on the network to maintain the value of that $9.99 a month. Although, without being a shill, it's easily the best value. Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast on Stitcher Premium at Stitcher.com/notsam. That's the best value in wrestling content. But close second is the WWE Network at $9.99. But yeah, I would try to, if you're going to do less pay-per-views, which I don't know if they will or not, we're just speculating, I would put on super shows, house shows, and things like that. All right, guys, I appreciate you guys being a part of this thing. I appreciate you guys listening to Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast once again. Don't forget to check out the YouTube channel. The Renee interview will be up in days if it's not already. The Titus O'Neil interview is already up there. And, of course, every week we put the podcast up on YouTube, the entire audio of it. So if that's easier for you to listen to it on YouTube. Be my guest. It's the same. Don't forget to subscribe to Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast on Stitcher Premium at Stitcher.com/notsam. And we will see you next week, right here on Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast. Toodles.
Thanks for listening. Follow at notsam on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And subscribe for free to listen every week to Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast.